Alrighty, video 10, let us sum up. I have said most of what I wanted to say, but just to kind of round the sequence of information up in the right manner. We understand the path cutter has many different functions. And the path cutter course material here is the bridge into the fifth dimension, which means that the last course 4, where I talk about the bridge maker or the galactic community or whatever the title will be, because I don't know that yet, will be from the understanding of, okay, what does it mean to become a galactic citizen? How do we change ourselves into becoming that? But we're still in the processes of getting the patterns of change that allows us to be operational in the fifth dimension, to recreate holographic energy systems that we can travel with on the code streams. You remember from my 2025 timeline traveler material, where I actually did the mind travel, and I got into trouble with some of the races that said that's unwarranted. We don't do that anymore. That's what you did during the time of Atlantis, or you did in the Lemurian epoch of the older civilizations, but we don't do that anymore because your physical DNA and who you are so contaminated. We don't want you here. You might be able to access in a higher state of who and what you are, but you're still connected to that physical form. That's your anchor point, and eventually, if you were here a longer period of time, you would contaminate our reality field, which is why they met me as a group, so they could counter me and clear it out, and told me literally, please don't do that. Don't extend your mind into our realities because we don't want you here. And that is, of course, also some of the things I've experienced when I was in Australia and other things where these different groups were not accustomed to humans being able to do that. So that's one of the abilities that actually were active under the time of Atlantis. And I keep saying I was not part of the humanoid colonies of Atlantis, but I was part of another colony, because I remember of the progressive races during the times of Atlantis, of the continents that were on a planet at the time, because I remember looking across the ocean and see Atlantis being nuked. Not with a nuclear bomb, but with a light bomb of some sort that completely devastated everything, even though they didn't get what was in the racial grids as well as in the networks, as I talked about, which was very, very unfortunate. So they transferred the technology and they transferred the viable racial grids without disconnecting it to the fallen grids. But they created a Lemurian barrier between the fallen grids and the viable grids. And perhaps they thought that the reseeding race would be able to transform and breach that barrier eventually and integrate the code level of the Lemurian barrier in the energy system on the 6th-dimensional level. And by that, get the code system there that would then reconnect the highest code streams and civilizations of the 4th cycle and the highest code streams and library setting of the Atlantean continent or the 5th cycle, so that that could be recreated. And I think that was the idea. The problem is we never got there, and we're not going to go there unless we are working enormously hard for it due to the hijacking and takeover. But if we see it in that light, we also begin to understand, why did the Dracos take us over? Because of that coding, the ability to get to that marvelous technology connecting to the original construction. If the Dracos that were in the regress state from the D10 collective would be able to get that in fusion, they would be recreated into their human form. I've seen how they used to look. So that's kind of, you could say, that's probably the trade what they did with the Elder. That was the argument. And that was from a pure play, so to speak, just kind of, yeah, we want to reactivate, so we'll help you to reactivate. And then when we couldn't do what we were doing, or they just got ill-minded, or they got taken over by the prince or whatever, it changed. And then they teamed up with the Niburians, and then we got the worker breeder race based upon the Neanderthal genome, which were part of the Anunnaki races and their recreation of the human genome in some 12,000 years ago. So the Sumerian culture goes further back than what science knows of. That's because they don't want to acknowledge these facts. And we have the remains of the megalithic cities that are all part of the original higher order civilizations. We see that in the stone structures, how they have been modeled like clay into stones, because they were able to use the energy configuration behind the physical form, the solidified crystalline molecular structure. Remember, at the times they still had access to the density energies. So it's easy peasy to recalibrate and reconfigure the solidified state by altering the crystalline configuration. Easy peasy, if the reality has density 2 energies connected to it, which we don't have anymore. That's kind of been taken away from us. 5,000 BC, that's kind of where we lost that ability. And that's where we get the last type of civilizations as science know of. They began their embodiment there, to put it that way, in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, leading into the timelines we know of. And that's the latest types of civilization that we can trace back to the Syrian Age of Egypt and the Baal's version of Syrian bees, not the crystalline, but the Syrian bees version in the Mesopotamia, working with the Niburians and that group of the Niburians under the dragon races. And then we had the other Niburians that under the Venusian strand, let's call them that, went in a different direction. I can't remember where that Niburian offling comes from, but the Niburian system is not just a planet X that is circling around. It is an entire collective in itself, which is connected to the Tiamat genome, the Leviathan genome, and some of the dragon races, but not the Draco races, because the dragon races and the Draco races are 2 different groupings. Again, we're going so far back in history that it really no longer makes any sense. But it's all been a hunt down for the elder genomes, the white strands, so to speak, as I talk about, the white elder races of all of the civilization of the galactic communities that used to be part of our universal matrix. And the timeline event, as I talked, demolished what we could say everything below the 5th dimension, but eventually, or the middle level of the density 2, but the middle domain, and the outer domains of most of the nodal points and reality fields that were in this structure centered around the Syrian system. And as that sector, the southern sector, kind of began to fall, well, it rippled up into the 7th and into the 8th and 9th, into the inner domains, because of the connection points of the technology, as well as the the original humanoid energy system had the density 2 as the lowest, the southern level, and then it had density 3 as the upper level, which I'm talking about in the template science courses as well, and all the other material. So the 6-layered energy system, the 3 layers that goes from the beginning that are connected to our physical form is density 2, hence the imbuement and the infusion from the sun. And then the top level of that 6-layered energy system is connected to the mind field and density 3, which is where we connect to the radiation energies. So therefore you saw eventually, as the lower levels got contaminated and fell like flies, then it rippled into the inner domains, which also began to fall like flies. And that's technically what transformed the entire T13 collective, except from the solar wishes that, as I talked about in the times of Atlantis, as well as in the time of Lemuria, that as it rippled back in time, because as it hit the different domains, it rippled back in time and transformed what we call the higher civilizations there. So that kind of sucks, because you kind of had the whole Lemurian epoch where we succeeded, went into Atlantis, and then we had the fall of Atlantis, we had the contamination that rippled back there, and then it rippled back into the earlier civilizations and the versions of us that had there. And I know this is where the mind begins to melt, because technically, how can it ripple back in time if we no longer exist there, but there exists an imprint of us there, which we are connecting to when working on timelines, and technically still exists there as a holographic imprint, as part of the library, as part of the recording of the planetary, in the planetary networks and in the planetary library. So it holographically and informationally still exist, which is why we can travel between the nodal points and technically recreate an earlier version of ourselves on that nodal point, except accept that these realities got infected and taken over and demolished and destroyed during the timeline event. Again, complicated matters. But this is the ability to use your chiasm correctly, to understand these nuances of code stream travel. What you're doing there, reconnecting to patterns of information, code streams, holographic network settings, nodal points, libraries, planetary records, universal records, different what we call domains levels and their records, the different dimensions of each and one of the domains, the different stargate systems, the main gate systems that transfer from one universal structure to another, in between the constellations, in between the star systems, in between the outer domain, the middle domain, and inner domain and core domain, and how these different gate systems need a specific configuration of your energy system. It needs a specific pattern that is a code stream connection point. So you travel in the code streams that are part of the holographic network, that are composed of light units that are holographic in nature, that can expand and contract and become galaxies and minimize into a little orb of nothingness. So a whole galaxy, if you take the holographic configuration, you can put it into an orb in your hand, if you know how to do so, because holographic energy can expand and contract by the use of the consciousness that are looking upon it. If it's of no use to be a huge galaxy, because that's just covering a lot of nodal points in the holographic network, where you can expand your mind from the core dimensions or the core domain and go out in different directions using the 12-pointed star of the 12 lineages, if you like to do that. You can create concentric circles following the domains in that network of the 12 lineages that goes from the core, and you can become a version of yourself in each and one of the lineages if you like. But if that no longer suits, you can contract all of these domain cycles that are part of your energy system and then just become a little orb. But you hold the information of all of it in the holographic network that you are composed of, that can become that little small unit. It doesn't make it more dense, actually it makes it lighter, which we're seeing with the ideas of the Planck, I forgot what they call it. There is Planck length, that is the smallest measurable length on the quantum level, but it has so high energy that it creates an enormous pull in itself, and that's taking what the thing is in the core of the black holes, where energy becomes so compact that it creates a gravitational pull where it becomes, it's incorrect to say dense, but it pulls everything in, and once it's trapped there in the high energy, it cannot get out. But the idea is that that's what happened with the Taurus technology that the Orions made. They used that idea of the complexity of galaxies, which could then be pulled into a very, very small area, and then they reversed it. So instead of having this high potential radiation orb that could be used as a sphere to run entire realities, they then turned it into a black hole that would suck out energies from entire reality. So they would throw these black holes into galaxies from where they could begin to harness the energies and holographic settings of that galaxy. They transformed the core of it to a black hole, and that's what's being undone with the technology that are now being pushed into our galactic core to take away the black hole in the middle of it, that is harnessing our galactic energies. So that's also important to understand. As that is happening, it's easier and easier to transform the density 3 level of the human population, because we are connected to the radiation field in the galactic core. So you see how it's all interconnected. So therefore, there are these bridges between the different states of reality into our energy system. And that's the most important part of being a path cutter and being a change maker and being a chaos pilot and a pioneer into the galactic communities, to understand these very complex sciences of how things work. Not that you need to be able to explain it the way I do, but that's when you can explain things, that means you have nailed the pattern. then you can read the complex information system and you have lodged it into your brain, so your brain can transform it into knowledgeable, linear, processual, or synergetic types of information that can go in all directions. You can envision it. And once you can envision it, you can begin to really work with it, because then it becomes easy for your brain to work with. Your brain works in imagery, in images, if you are having an expanded right hemisphere. So that also goes back into when we talk about the ability to see things. If you are a male, you will be oriented in the left hemisphere, where you will see things abstract, compartmentalized in what we call algebra, mathematical ways, and not being the greatest image maker, which is in your right hemisphere. And that goes with your shut down heart field. So you could say the mind field is in a way connected to the left hemisphere, and the heart field is connected to the right hemisphere. Because the emotional field runs on images. It runs on recognizable patterns that goes with the electrochemical processes that are best expressed in different colors, which then creates images. Because what are images? They are the combination of different code streams, of different frequencies, and of different electrochemical processes that creates a vibration that links up to the frequencies, from where it creates a pattern that we will interpret as an image. Because what we see and what we decode is all about what we have learned to interpret it as. Just think about a colorblind that are seeing things differently, or a child that hasn't learned to interpret things within the programs yet will then see things differently. So what controls our imagery and the patterns of perception in our brains are the programs that are linked up to our human constitution as inside this reality field. So get rid of the cubes, you will begin to see things as they truly are. Clear out the technology that's controlling you, you'll begin to perceive things differently. So that's also part of it. And most of you have the parasites that are preventing you from doing so. So if we talk about the YX human, well, then if the heart is shut down and it's all about mental processes, and it's not really any psychological spectrum that can run on the different conceptualizations of what it means to be human, and address the emotionality in the proper way, but always shutting it down and minimizing it and working away from it and finding bad excuses why he should not look at it or whatever, well, then the right hemisphere and the limbic system and the emotional spectrum will not undergo transformational processes. Science cannot do that. Females, on the other hand, are very good at that, but they need to work it up to link up to the sciences, where they are able to deduce and work with these different patterns and clear them out so they won't run them and control them. So again, we are having the different steps that we need to learn. Women need to become more scientific, men need to become more emotional, but in the right manner, as in what we could call very mature emotionality, where we understand that working with our emotions is not about freaking out or controlling them or suppressing them, but transforming them and dealing with reality as it is in a balanced manner, so that whatever comes our way, we will deal with it as chaos pilots. We will navigate through the challenges without losing our footing. And we will clear out the emotional residuals of it. We will get rid of the parasites and the energy patterns that are connected to these technologies that are linking us up to programs that makes us perceive reality in a specific way. And we will learn to do the same with the mind field. Working with the different sciences, which I've been unraveling here in this, the path cutter material, beginning to open up the door for the complexity of really contemplation, of really working with the higher order sciences. Because working with the higher order sciences is not a linear process where we study as we studied with the general sciences, the frequency sciences. No, here we really understand that our brain is a network that's connected to the holographic network and the density of realities, from where it can connect by sampling and overlapping patterns we create in our mind field that will be drawn to the code streams of the original patterns that we want to investigate. And then we connect via our mind patterns to these reality field patterns using the code streams and the vibrational energies of our heart field, which then should be of the highest purity rate. And there we amplify and get that information stream that we need to recreate the same level of our mind field. So that's how we recreate our mind field, via the advanced sciences that used to be part of the original civilizations. And that's done in contemplation. That's where you go in and meditate in the complex manner, where you're not envisioning things. That's where you get the information and then you work. You get the download and then you unravel the download by contemplating on, exploring it, stepping into it, and working with it as if it were a physical reality. What do you need to do there? What do you need to... As I said, with the crystal cities, you go there, you see the gate. What do you need to do? You activate your hand, the code level, and you go, you know what you're doing there. You activate your energy system. You put your hand on. You see the door open. What do you do then? You're part of other realities. That develops the mind field into its highest potentials. So we have barely begun the work that we need to do. So this is where we are learning to work with what is in front of us of clearing work, learn to work with what's in front of us of the energy work to maintain ourselves, understand the many levels of who and what we are, up to 9 different levels as a minimum, replicated into the emotional field, clearing that one out. So you get into the mental field, where you begin to work with these 5 layers of the domains and the dimensions of the domains, where you will be able to connect to the patterns of change that allows you to recalibrate your mind field to perceive the different settings of a reality field. And there, by that combination, your timeline work will not just be about clearing, but will begin to be about reconstruction. That happens when the mind field transforms out of being what we call the transmutation into devastation cycle, or into dust, and become the transmutation into its highest potential, highest progression rate, where we begin the true progression work, as it were arranged in the original worlds, as well as in the earlier stages of the LPU and of what was going here before the D13 collective decided everything had to run on technology. So the D14 collective has always been represented inside this reality to keep up the original dynamics and elevation cycle rules and laws. And as I said, those of us who operate under the progressive worlds, we are under very strict laws. It's order, harmony, and balance. So via order, we create harmony so that everybody can progress as they're supposed to. And with that, we create balance between energy and consciousness. By that, we create the right type of life force. And that's those of us who are part of the progressive worlds. We don't want it any different. We are very happy with all of these laws. Everything is run by laws. And whenever I have had doubt about anything, and I'm trying to convey that to you in the material, I use the principles. What does the principles say? Not what I want them to say, but what they say. This is how it works. The science is behind the principles. Because this is all about energy configuration and energy reconfiguration. Principles rebuild your energy system. Principle leads you into the correct purity rate. Rules lead you into the correct standards of how to be amongst other races. Laws determines how you use the energies of the reality you're part of. So you don't create distortion. So you don't destroy the original constructions of the ancient ones. There's some very profound reasons why we follow these laws, because we want to follow in the footsteps of the ancient ones. We want to use their constructions. And by that, we are under the laws of the ancient ones. If we don't want to be in their constructions, we go somewhere else. And that's what the D13 collective had chosen to do. So they have made their own laws and their own universes because they were not comfortable with this rigid law principle rule system. They wanted something else. So that's also to be understood, and that's why the councils for a long time did not work against it. If the timeline event had never happened, they would not have intervened at all. They have only intervened because the timeline event and the dysfunctional D13 collective genetic flaws completely went whack and began changing civilizations into dark civilizations. Then they intervened to protect the D14 and the original cycles under the progressive dynamics. And remember, the D13 were also supposed to be part of the original cycles. And that's why the work I've been doing is still, and many have been doing, has been to kind of say, come on home. Come on home, guys. Don't be in that fallen cycle, whatever. At some point, you will lose your connection to the original universal cycles. And once that happens, you will lose connection to the source cycles, and you will lose connection to the libraries, and you will lose connection to the planetary records. You will lose connection to everything that keeps civilizations alive. And you will deteriorate and cease to exist. But once the reversal has happened, and the ill-mindedness kicks in, superiority follows, and that feeling of we will fix it, we will know this, we handle this, fuck the councils, that is what runs these civilizations. And that's why there's no really hope until they come with their hat in their hands, as it said in Danish, and literally say, I'm done. I know it doesn't work. I want to go home. And that's true home. That's recalibration. That's dismantling of everything they are and be pulled out as genetics to be recalibrated, completely cleared, and then reseeded. That's that type of home that they know they have to do, because everything in their consciousness units is so distorted that what can be transferred must be recalibrated into what we call the original standards of their lineage. But the progressive worlds, the D14, are more than happy to take them back, because it's part of it's an entire tower of lineages from the D13 collective and down that is now 3 lineages that are going onto the path of failure. That's sad. That's too much. Even though we've got 12 lineages and 9 will proceed, it's still too much. Okay, so that's why the chances have been given extensively. But now we are in the elevation cycles of the overall universal structure, and that's the grand cycle, and therefore that game has to end. Because now we are pulling out and moving on, and whatever will be left will then be the D13 collective in the new universal structure. That means that the ones that have not reached the highest potentials in this universal structure, not the fallen ones of the D13, because they are not being transferred, but those of us who are doing the work and used to be part of the D14 and get ourselves recalibrated and transfer via the gate systems to the restoration program or the 6th dimension or whatever, will become part of the new energetic universal structures. Because how is this built up? Well, we kind of know from the Bailey material, you have the intelligent activity, and then you have the love, wisdom, and then you have the will. The will is the top life force, energy, consciousness units that have made it and are gathered there and create that one. That's why I don't need to call it the D15, because there's no need to put it that. It's something we are creating. And the ones that are oriented towards the energy of the previous universal cycles are in the D13 collective. The ones that are focused on the energies of the upcoming universal cycles are the D14. So there you begin to see already there we have one that are oriented into transform the older type of universal structures with the older type of consciousness units. And then you have the ones that are the recreation, the new creation of this universal cycle that are working towards the next universal cycle. And those who doesn't make it from the D14 will then become the ones that in the next universal cycle will continue what they didn't accomplish in this one and become the what we call the backbone of the civilizations, of the energy realities, the outer domain, the middle domain, and then the new collective that will unravel the present state of the new universal structure will then become what we were in the D14, but that will be another group because they've moved far beyond what we are. That's technically the D15 that will then become the D14, and then those of us who were the D14, we will become the D13 in the new universal cycle, just to put it that way, will be called something else. And then the ones that made it to the D15 in this universal cycle will become the D14, the love and light, so to speak, the love and wisdom, and together we will work together. Those of us who are in the D13 column We will continue to transform energy and learn to master energy, holographic networks, and everything we're already working on here. And those of us who succeed, we will then move into the D14 of that future universal cycle where we'll continue our consciousness potentials development processes. And then we will all end up in the D15. There will be from the D13 that can jump directly into the D15 at the top level. So that's how the universal cycles work. So we will not, while we do this work, will not become top of the cream of the cake in the next universal cycle. We'll have to continue our very tedious work, which is why many are just giving up and saying that's too much, can't do it. But the trick is to understand that if you can clear out enough, you can reconnect with what you used to be on the highest level, and that can be transferred into this energy system. There you can work with it and become what you're supposed to be in this present cycle. And with that, you will connect to the non-contaminated code streams of the original outer domain. And there you will create enough viability and enough purification in your energy system. You will have the highest standards that is possible for this outer domain configuration and setting and structure, that you will be able to follow the original structure as it's being pulled out and transferred into the new universal structure. Everything is possible. It all comes down to how hard you're going to work for it, how much are you going to let go of to be able to get there. And as we always know and have always talked about, the main problem with humans inside this reality is that they have so much difficulty letting go of the physical plane, the physical connection to the physical desires, materialism, physicality, love, relationships, work, career, personal ambitions, whatever. They are so infused by the D13 collective standards and orientations. So that's why it takes so much to change that, to become part of the ones that will move on and elevate back to the original understandings of, yes, technology was used to transform the energies of the previous universal cycle. That was a good idea. But now it's taken over as we've seen it inside this reality field as well, and just in present day. And turn it all transhuman. Technology constantly gets the upper hand because humans loses the ability to work with their own energy system, and they lose the progression rate because they lose the connection to their function and their consciousness units and the lineage they came from. Thinking they become the masters of the universe because they master technology. That's not advancement. And I know many of, when you do read some of the older material, they talk about the spiritual plane. That's just the D14 collective that have the ability to be in organic form, but mainly chooses to operate in the higher levels of the middle domain and the inner domain, and thereby do not need an organic form to create life force because they have already done that. That was done in the earlier stages and the earlier civilizations. When we tie back to Hyperborea, many of the ones that are now in their quote-unquote light body, just being energy and consciousness, they mastered the organic outer domain level during the Hyperborean epoch, where the outer domains of our universal structure were still very much connected to the highest or the original configuration of this universal structure before everything fell and things kind of became very difficult because the outer domain matter solidified, stopped having its holographic features and became crystalline in a rigid manner that could either lead to evaporation, but slowly and surely over the course of time lost its ability to become fluid and flexible, and were upheld by plasma crystals that could shift between the different states of matter, but only because they were connected to the core, that were connected to the core of the sun, that were connected to the galactic core, that were connected to the progressive worlds, which kept infusing these cores with the holographic density energy so that things would not solidify too much. But eventually, as we saw it in Atlantis, they were misusing these energy configurations and creating hybrids and chimeras and tampered with the consciousness units as well as the organic DNA, let us put it that way, in the version it was at that time, and with that misused the reality field energies and contaminated the library, the technologies and the construction. So therefore, it had to be demolished, and therefore the progressive worlds began the disconnection, because they knew we're reseeding now, but the chances are slim, because the overall effect of the continent where the Atlantean program unraveled, or the colonies and the galactic races that were there, they had a higher infectious rate. So it was given as the last chance, and therefore we run out of chances. And therefore, this is where we're standing at this turning point where either you do it or you don't. There's no in-betweens anymore, as I always said. So now you kind of get the whole picture of it. Either you do what you need to do now and move on, or you remain where you are because that's what you have chosen. You are choosing not to do the work when you don't do the work. You are choosing not to do the work when you have excuses for why you don't want to do the work. You're choosing not to do the work when you are not struggling with what is preventing you from doing the work. You're choosing not to do the work when you find excuses of why it's okay for you to not struggle with what is preventing you from doing the work. I hope you understand what I'm saying here. Some of you are saying, I tried but I failed. I tried but I failed. Yes, but are you trying hard enough? Because I have definitely worked my way through the ordeal of how difficult it is. But I keep going. I don't fail. I keep going until I master it. And I seclude myself and I put myself in energy work for 12 hours a day if I had to. I did that with some of the underworld energies until I got a grip of it. I worked there 12 hours a day in that horror show until I got a hang of it. That was horrible, but I kept going because I knew I need to understand this so I can dismantle it. I can't shy away from it because it's horrible. I need to understand what it is. And that's what makes people do the transition. That understanding that no matter how fucking hard it is, we persevere, we keep doing it for hours and hours and hours. And if we have a partner that's in the way, we say, I love you, but I need to focus on this one. So we go our separate ways. If we have a job that prevents us from doing this, we let go of the job. If we have any life circumstance we can't change so it works in a manner that is doable for us to do our energy work, we let it go. And we do it in a nice way so that we don't cause more harm than necessary. Okay? So with that completion there, I think I have covered all the bases of the progression work going into the Changemaker material, and the next course will be as bridge makers into the galactic communities. And there I'll work on something completely different, because there I will assume that you know your galactic history, you are activating your different density levels of your energy system. You are on top of your energy work. You know how to clear yourself. You know how to maintain yourself. You have also done the template science courses, so you know the timeline work. You know what you need to do with your template. So I don't need to look into that anymore. I can there just begin working with, okay, what does it take to be part of the galactic communities? What do they expect of us? What worlds do we enter into when we holographically travel there? Begin to have encounters with these different races. What do we need to do when we get there, etc., etc. So that's a whole other modality of information, which will lead into the pioneer work, where I will begin my portion of collaborating with some of the ancient galactic races that used to be part of this reality field, that are part of what we call the D14 collective. I am literally leaving behind with this series of videos the D13 collective, because the councils no longer want me to work there. They have understood why the D13 collective has failed. That's been part of what I've been doing here in the Soul Releasing. And we have released enough different variations of the D13 collectives to be recalibrated and reseeded. So there's no longer any usage or purpose of me to roam around in 3 lineages that are now completely falling out of sync with the original universal laws. So by that, I'm retracting my perception from these realities, as well as eventually recalibrating myself to such a degree that the people I will work with will no longer have connection points to the D13 collective. And that means some of you that have been working with me for a long time, you will lose interest in working with me, because the new line of work and the new sciences I come up with will be something you no longer feel is right for you, because you're still stuck in the D13 agenda and the factions that are controlling this reality of either the Dark Avatar Collective, the Parallel Universal Matrix, or the Transhuman Agenda. So this is, as always, again, when we're doing this work, I have shared so much I can with you to this level, but then I'm doing another jump. I'm frog leaping here, and that means some of you will continue, some of you will take what you have learned so far and use it as much as you can. That's why I made it as a self-study. And you will do it on your own, and you will continue to the degree where you will feel it's a good idea to work with me. You might try and have a session with me, or you might try and work with me, but if it's not for you to do, if the factions don't want you to do, rest assured, they will make sure that our connection will be disconnected. They will make sure. I've seen it so many times now. You might think you want to do this, then you begin working with me, and then shit hits the fan, and then you're just kind of, yeah, nope. Whatever the excuse will be, you will lose interest in working with me. So that's how the segregation dynamics are going to play in the times to come. Both as the ones that are going to do the transition will be segregated via the factions that are controlling their energy system, or those of us who are doing the progression work, we will be segregated simply due to the laws of energetic and genetic affinity. And most of the races that had an interest in working with me or pushing people my way were doing that so that entities within their system of the original civilizations could be released. And since my focus will no longer be there, that will also change who will come and work with me. And the idea is that I would like the ones that are working with me in the future to be the ones that are doing the pioneering work more than the change maker or the progression work, because that is in a way has reached its peak, and either you do it or you don't. And if you can't do it on your own, well, no matter how many sessions you're doing with me, you will not change that, because then you have not dealt correctly with the energetic parasites, the technologies, and the programs or the factions that are keeping you stuck in the old configurations. Because with the incoming density 3 energies, you should be able to wrestle yourself out of these configurations if you still have viable genetics that goes with either the solar races humanoids or the original D14 collective races that used to be the leading races inside this universal structure before we created the LPU to be a portion that would assist the D13 collective and their work to master energy and consciousness in the proper ways. But as you know, that has failed, so it's time to move on for all of us. Back to the original ways of working with consciousness and energy, create the highest purity rate that denotes the highest pure life force you can create, the life force of the innocence, and then move into the high standards where your energy system is following the laws and the principles and the rules of the progressive races, so that you unfold your highest progression rate inside this universal structure, which enables you to link up to the original code streams and patterns of energy transformation and development and the technologies that are part of the holographic teaching system under the ancient ones and the original D14 collective of races that used to traverse this universal matrix and universal structure, where they would learn to master energy and consciousness under the laws and the rules and the constructions of the ancient ones. Thank you.